In the beginning, everything felt possible. We were young enough to believe that love was a force strong enough to smooth out any difference, any misunderstanding, any future hardship. Commitment felt like a promise that automatically carried wisdom with it, as if choosing each other meant we would naturally grow in the same direction. Those early days were filled with plans and optimism. We talked about the life we would build, the stability we would achieve, the kind of couple we hoped to become. There was laughter then, long conversations that stretched late into the night, and a sense that whatever came our way, we would face it together. Marriage, at first, felt like an extension of that hope. We stepped into it believing effort alone would be enough. If something felt difficult, we assumed it was temporary. If something felt confusing, we trusted time would clarify it. As the years passed, life began to demand more from us. Careers required focus and sacrifice. Financial responsibilities grew heavier. Family expectations multiplied quietly but persistently. Without realizing it, survival began to replace curiosity. I started working longer hours, telling myself it was an act of love. Providing felt like the most tangible way to prove commitment. Every late night at work felt justified by the belief that I was securing our future. She, meanwhile, began to retreat inward. Not dramatically, not obviously, but subtly. Her expectations went unmet, not because they were unreasonable, but because they were rarely voiced and even more rarely explored together. We both believed we were doing the right thing. I believed sacrifice meant loyalty. She believed adjustment meant strength. Neither of us recognized that we were slowly drifting apart while standing perfectly still. Our conversations changed shape. They became short, more practical. We discussed schedules, expenses, responsibilities. We stopped discussing fears, dreams, disappointments. Emotional sharing began to feel unnecessary, even inconvenient. When moments of tension arose, we smoothed them over quickly. There was no time for long discussions, no energy for emotional excavation. Avoidance felt efficient and mature. We mistook the absence of conflict for harmony. We mistook endurance for devotion. And because nothing visibly collapsed, we assumed everything was intact. Years moved forward this way, predictable, orderly, quiet. From the outside, we looked settled. From the inside, something vital was eroding. I didn't notice the shift immediately. Disconnection rarely announces itself. It shows up in small absences, in the things you stop sharing, the questions you stop asking, the curiosity that quietly fades. She noticed it too, later learned, but felt unsure how to name it. Speaking up felt risky. What if it sounded ungrateful? What if it caused unnecessary conflict? Silence felt safer. We became experts at functioning, managing a household, coordinating responsibilities, attending family events with practiced ease. We performed partnership well, but intimacy requires more than performance. It requires presence, and presence was becoming harder to sustain. The breaking point didn't come during an argument. There was no raised voice, no accusation, no dramatic confrontation. It came quietly, almost unnoticed at first. One night, lying awake beside her, I realized I no longer knew what frightened her. I didn't know what weighed on her mind when she couldn't sleep. And more painfully, I realized she no longer knew those things about me either. We shared space, but not vulnerability. We shared a life, but not our inner worlds. What connected us now were logistics, not emotions. That realization landed heavily. It wasn't anger I felt, it was grief. Grief for something that had faded without permission. Grief for a closeness that once felt natural. I tried, awkwardly, to bridge the gap. Small attempts at conversation, gentle questions, but years of silence don't dissolve easily. The space between us felt unfamiliar and fragile. She responded cautiously, unsure whether this was a passing phase or a genuine shift. We both felt exposed, uncertain how to step back into emotional territory we had abandoned for so long. The more we tried, the more we realized how far apart we had grown. Our assumptions about each other no longer matched reality. Our needs had evolved, but our communication had not. Slowly, the weight of that realization began to affect everything. Family gatherings felt strained, not because of conflict, but because of pretense. We smiled, but it took effort. Friends noticed changes, though they didn't always name them. Questions became more careful. Invitations felt different. We offered vague explanations that satisfied curiosity without revealing truth. At night, sleep became difficult. My mind replayed past moments, searching for signs I had missed. I blamed myself relentlessly. Maybe if I had listened more. Maybe if I had worked less. Maybe if I had spoken sooner. She carried her own guilt, questioning whether her silence had been unfair, whether her expectations had been unreasonable. We were both trapped in private cycles of self-blame. The realization that staying had cost us something profound was deeply unsettling. We had sacrificed parts of ourselves in the name of stability, believing that was the noble thing to do. Leaving felt terrifying. Staying felt suffocating. Neither option felt like a victory. Both carried loss. What hurt the most was understanding that no one was the villain. There was no betrayal to point to, no cruelty to condemn. Just two people who loved each other, but lacked the tools to stay emotionally connected. The fallout wasn't explosive, it was heavy. It lingered in every interaction, every decision, every quiet moment when we realized how much had changed. We had entered marriage believing commitment could conquer any difference. What we learned, painfully, was that commitment without communication slowly turns into distance. Survival had replaced intimacy so gradually that we barely noticed until intimacy was almost gone. And by then, reclaiming it felt overwhelming. The story of our breaking point isn't about failure in the traditional sense. It's about what happens when endurance is mistaken for love, and silence is mistaken for peace. Looking back, I understand now that the most damaging moments weren't the hard ones. They were the quiet ones, the times we chose not to speak, not to ask, not to listen. That is how our story unfolded. Not in chaos, but in calm. Not in rage, but in restraint. And by the time we truly saw what was happening, we were already standing at the edge of something we never intended to lose.